begin our conversation on assessing human rights index in Nigeria, here is a background report put together by Oyeyemi Ajayi.
Just like the late Afrobeat maestro Fela Anikulapo Kuti in one of his songs, he said, "Human right na my property." This reflects that human rights is everyone's property, meaning that all human beings are entitled to human rights. This narrative remains the same globally, including Nigeria. Hence, it's the imperativeness of its protection. Right to life, expression, personal liberty, fair hearing, conscience, religion, amongst others, cannot be underestimated. Years back, military rule in Nigeria violated human rights while ruling with decree, but the democratic dispensation restored these with the entrenchment of human rights protection in the Constitution. However, over the years, the resurgence of human rights violation has been reported at different quarters, while service of justice at some points are being denied, thereby probing the effectiveness of human rights protection in the country. Most times, the female gender has been on the receiving end of human rights infringement, with cases of gender-based violence and rape, with perpetrators going scot-free. Undenied are cases of child labor, child neglect, and abuse under the guise of corporal punishments. Aside these, issues of electoral violence cannot be swept under the carpet, as such acts prevent the people from exercising their franchise before and during election. As a way of ensuring the protection of human rights, the government empowered the National Human Rights Commission to attend to cases of human rights infractions. With this, the agency attends to diverse cases in addition to other loud voices canvassing for the entrenchment of human rights. How has Nigeria fared in the stand against human rights violation in the country? This is one golden question our guests will be answering amongst others shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Oyeyemi Ajayi, for that background. With us in the studios to discuss issues around the human rights indices in our country, let's welcome the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Tony Ojukwu, learned senior advocate of Nigeria. We're glad to have you this morning.
Okay.
Also here with us in the studios is the Country Director, Amnesty International, Mrs. Osai Ojigo. We're glad to have you this morning.
Thanks for having me. Good morning. Also with us in the studio is the Chairperson, NHRC Government Council, Dr. Salamatu Suleiman. Many thanks for joining us, ma'am.
Good morning.
And a retired Commissioner of Police, Lawrence Alobi, is also here with us in the studio to lend his voice to the issue of human rights in Nigeria. Gentlemen and madams, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. What we'd like to also very specially welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria after a long while, former Commissioner of Police Lawrence Alobi.
Former retired.
We know that's sometimes
former retired.
An
office retired is a career rank.
Precisely. I'll tell you why.
Yes.
There are some of your colleagues and others who are also in the public service or in the civil service. When you say retired, they will quarrel and say, I'm not tired. I'm still strong. So you don't say former. Of course, you left office on the basis of retirement.
Yeah.
So we are glad to have you back, but more especially to commiserate with you, because we've not had the opportunity of saying that. For the benefit of our viewers, CP Alobi lost his wife some while back, and he's, of course, emerged now from mourning. We're glad that you're here with us in the studio this morning to discuss issues around human rights indices in our country. So, CP, straight away, sometimes we don't even put the retired or former. We'll give you your rank and say, CP Lawrence Alobi, we're glad that you're here with us in the studios. Let's begin the conversation with the Human Rights Commission, because in discussing human rights, obviously, we're trying to interrogate the observance or derogations from our Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution, which of course embodies the jurisprudence around the human rights issues in our country. How well are we in terms of our human rights observance?
Well, I think we're doing well. It's not Uhuru. I mean, we can do a lot better. But I always say, to know the present, you have to look at the past and then see where you are now. Of course, for a very long period, Nigeria was under military rule. It was in 1999 that we have had sustained democracy for almost a period of 20 years now. And that means that some of the freedoms, most of the freedoms we were not able to enjoy during the military rule, we are enjoying now. We could enjoy better. So for me, I think we have made a lot of improvement, but there's room to keep improving.
All right, talking about improvement, Tony Ojukwu, your commission actually stated that you received over 1.7 million complaints last year as regards human rights violations. And according to your commission, that is the highest so far since the establishment in 1995. You say we're doing well. How well are we doing in that regards? And what are the factors responsible for this increase?
Of course, you would expect that at times when you get figures, it could be because more awareness is now being created and people are able to now know that their rights are being violated and they're reporting. The situation in the past, for instance, during military regime, how are you going to report? So 10 million could have been violated and nobody reported anything. So we are doing a lot of work sensitizing people to even know themselves, because the situation was that people didn't even know they had rights. Now they know they have rights and they're able to get assistance and they're approaching the commission, which is a level of improvement as well. So the fact that there are high figures does not mean that it is worse now. However, the environment now is also a little bit dicey. You know, insecurity is a major issue. Internal displacement is a major issue. Flooding is a major issue. So, I mean, these are things that nobody planned for, but they have come. But the important thing is, these 1.7 million people who are able to complain are now getting assistance. Unlike a situation before, where they will probably not even talk about it, and they will die in silence, they will suffer in silence. So, yes, the numbers are increasing. Is positive in the sense that people are able to be conscious, because the beginning of defense of human rights is even the consciousness that you have a right. So we are happy that a large number of Nigerians now know when their right is violated and can demand for accountability, that can demand for remedy. We are emerging from a station where rights would have been violated and you wouldn't even know, you wouldn't even ask for any help, and you will die in silence. So yes, the numbers have increased. We can explain that in terms of the insurgency. We can explain that in terms of the natural disasters we've experienced over the time, but I think it's not all bad.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony Ojukwu, SA. Let's bring in the country director of Amnesty International. Your organization, of course, issues its own reports from time to time. What is your assessment of the state of human rights in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. So, human rights has evolved in Nigeria. We do see a high incidence of compliance by the state in terms of adopting the international treaties. So, for example, in the last 5 years, we have the Anti-Torture Act. We've also had the country participate in several international human rights assessment processes like the Universal Periodic Review, as well as the recently concluded Committee Against Torture. So in terms of compliance, in terms of visibly committing to these human rights principles, we've seen an increase in that regard. The challenge has really been in following through on some of these complaints. So while it's easier for people to complain, actually getting cases resolved in a timely manner has been a big bottleneck, which then discourages complainants who then feel that they cannot get justice because they have to spend such a long time in court, or they have to go through several processes in order to get their cases heard. The other is in terms of the impact on mass populations of people. So while we've seen individual cases that we've brought to the attention of the state get attention and get reviews and get access to their lawyers and things like that. So these are cases of people who have suffered torture or who family members are seeking compensation for unlawful arrest, unlawful detention. We are seeing shockingly that when it involves mass displacement of people, like the issue of IDPs that have been increasing in Nigeria, the country, the government has been quite slow in addressing and ensuring that safety and security of lives and property is secured. Or when we see forced evictions, like in Lagos, for example, where huge informal settlements are being evicted in order to produce luxury apartments, you begin to question, is there a place for poor people in the Nigeria of today? And how are their issues being considered and evaluated in terms of the progress that the country wants to see economically? So these are some of the challenges we've seen. And I end on one point because we're also in the period of 16 days of activism. So sexual and gender-based violence really got a lot of attention during the COVID lockdown because there were so many cases of women and girls who were abused. And we've seen in the last 2 years a rapid ascent by many of the states who were hesitating before to domesticate the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act to do so. So while we appreciate the fact that nearly, I think it's like 33 states now that have a VAP law, it would be important to ensure that government put resources in place to make those laws effective. Otherwise, the hope that we now have would become quickly dashed. And we know that sexual and gender-based violence is one of the hardest crimes to prosecute and get convictions because of the nature of the crime, the cultural stigma that comes around it, and the vulnerability of victims who have experienced such a heinous violation. Thank you.
Well said, Osai Ojigo. But you started by saying that it's high compliance by the state. I'm going to take you up on that because I've been following Amnesty International for quite a while now. And, you know, I want to find out if that's the position of your organization, if the state actually, if the compliance level is actually high, like you say. But I'll quickly go to CP Lawrence Alobi. You know, the right to life, which is the chief right, guaranteed under Section 33 of the 1999 Constitution, is regrettably the most violated rights in Nigeria, you know, as a result of activities of state actors and non-state actors. You know, so quickly, I'd like you to tell us, what is the impact, let's look at non-state actors now, terrorism, as you know, a major issue at the moment. What is the impact of terrorism on human rights?
Yeah, you see, it's right. The right of the citizens, like we've never explained, is enshrined in the Constitution, African Charter 2. You see, security is a threat to the human right. Insecurity, I'm sorry, is a threat to the human right. Because when you right to life, like you said, when life is being threatened, then of course it means you don't have a right. When a right is being threatened by either by terrorism or kidnappers or these criminal elements. Now the point is that you cannot enforce your right when you don't have the capacity. And they say a law is of no value to man and society if it's not enforced. The value of law to man is based on its enforcement. And that is the police and security agencies are there to promote human rights in the course of the enforcing the law. When they prevent somebody's life being protection of life and property under Section 4 of the Police Act, the police are there to protect life and property. When the life of the citizens are being protected by the police, they are invariably protecting and promoting human rights. But when that is not possible, like the police now, you cannot find the police everywhere in part of the nooks and crannies of the country in terms of the manpower depletion. They are ill-equipped. They are in terms of logistics and so forth. So these are also some of the challenges that will exacerbate human rights abuse in the society, because the police and other police agents are there to protect the citizens. But with insurgency now everywhere, threat, and the other apart from the camps, for instance, this the crime-prone area, where you have the terrorism in the northeast and other part of the country, the police have other functions to perform. like maintain law and order along the city and up all corners of the country. So terrorism is a great threat to human rights, because see, you are helpless. Like the girls who were kidnapped sometimes ago, people have been kidnapped sometimes ago, they ask for ransom. So it's a threat to human rights. That is an obvious fact, notorious fact. So it's only when the state now should not be both the state actors, the police and security agencies, can also help, and help that can be done by getting them empowered, getting more power, getting more policemen everywhere, because prevention is also, visibility of the police is enough to prevent crime. It's a crime preventive strategy. But when they're not there, the people become vulnerable. They become very, very vulnerable to being attacked. So I think security in itself and terrorism are all serious threat to human rights. It was a big human rights abuse, and it's also so insecurity, terrorism, a very great threat to the human rights of citizens, and even property, because the properties are being abused, people have been being attacked, and so forth. So terrorism is really a threat to human rights in the society. But the government should also do one thing. One thing I have always thought of is that the government itself is not doing much. Though my friend S.A. and Ojukwu just said that must have been achieved. The government itself, we don't wait until when it occurs, then we now think about people to go and complain. That is reactive action. How do we prevent? How do we get people enlightened to know that yes, the rights are not supposed to be abused. People are not supposed to be abused. That enlightenment is education, public education about the rights of the citizens. Like UNICEF chapter, the preamble says that as war begins in the hearts of men, so the foundation of peace will be planned, consulted in the hearts of men. That education, public enlightenment, knowing that you don't have to abuse other people's rights. You have to be sure the humanity in you. So I think the government should go further. Not only wait until when they occur, not to go and report, start investigation. And then again, like you mentioned, that in the military rule, there was a massive abuse of human rights, because then it was military rule based on the barrel of the gun, repressive policing, and so forth. When in democracy, what we now need in this country is democratic policing. And democratic policing is anchored in principle of the rule of law. Human rights is one of the attributes of democracy. The rule of law is attributes of democracy. Now the police need to be imbibed. They need to imbibe these attributes, so they can enforce them. It has been proven that the type of government in the country determines the style of policing or framework of policing. Usually you have militarized policing, colonial you have colonial policing, which is repressive and so forth. In the democracy of this, what we have today, since 1990 date, the government should make effort that the police and security agencies imbibe democratic policing principles and law enforcement. That will enable us to promote human rights. But because right now, the police have what they call neo-colonial policing, in that what they learn to do in the military rule and the colonial rule, they have not been able to orientate themselves. You see that when somebody is arrested, you are a complaint getting against somebody, so you are a suspect, they believe he's guilty of the offense. Even issue of the right to innocency, right to fair hearing, all these rights are not there, because they've not been given that education to know that the citizens have a right and so forth. So I think they need the police in particular, because the police law enforcement is the police, is a principal agency. They need to be educated on the principle and practice of democratic policing, for them to understand that the right of the citizens need to be protected and defended.
Thank you very much, CP Alobi, there for the points that you have raised. Now, the irony is that we often say that during military rule, human rights are in abeyance. But the National Human Rights Commission came into existence under the military. This was during the regime of General Sani Abacha, through the instrumentality of Professor Awalu Yadudu, who was then special advisor on legal affairs to the head of state, military head of state at the time. So we've had the Human Rights Commission in existence for a couple of decades and ongoing now. I want to come to the chairperson of the Governing Council of the Human Rights Commission. How well resourced is the commission in one, advancing the frontiers of human rights through, of course, public enlightenment, and more particularly helping citizens for the restoration of their rights where those rights have been violated? How well is the commission, in your opinion, doing?
Okay, thank you very much. I think
I will say the commission is doing fairly well. We may not be as resourced as we ought to be or as we wished we were, but there has been progress over the years. And there has also been a lot of development within the commission itself. My own council was inaugurated last year, and I believe even the caliber of people that were brought on board shows that there is a lot of commitment to ensure that the mandate is carried forward. We have a 15-member council comprising various people from various walks of life and various competencies. We have lawyers, we have civil society organization representatives, we have representatives of government, and the commission itself is organized in a way that makes the work go well, so to speak, because we have departments that are organized in thematic areas: civil and political rights, economic and social rights, rights of the vulnerable, rights of women and children. So in terms of the actual funding to make things move, I will say we are still working on it. We are working with the government, but I must say there is a lot of commitment on the part of the government to ensure that things go well in terms of human rights. Last year, at this around this time, during the International Human Rights Celebration, we actually had audience with Mr. President and presented our action plan. And he was very, very supportive. And since then, we have also seen commitment from the government. Because if you recall, this year, there have been compensations paid to people who suffered under EndSARS and other violations that were done by security agencies. And I think it is the first time that that has happened in the history of the commission. It was not enough to compensate everybody, but it was a very, very good start, and it has made a statement that the government is actually committed to enforcing or promoting and protecting people's rights, and where these are violated, it is ready to come forward and say, yes, we accept this had not been done right, and we are going to make it right. Some things cannot be restored in terms of human life, but the commitment that, yes, we know wrongs have been done and we are committed to making them right. I think that is one of the positive things I have seen happening since I came on board.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Salamatu. I'll stay with you. Your commitment, in HRC to make things right. As regards the complaints that his commission received, what tops the agenda is child rights issues and women, gender-related issues. Could you tell us what the NHRC is actually doing? First and foremost, tell us what really are the issues, as regards the complaints, as regards children and women. What really are the issues, and what's the NHRC doing, to take care of some of these issues?
Thank you very much. I think in terms of child rights, most of the complaints we see at the commission are abandonment, people abandoning their children, people taking undue advantage of children. And in terms of women, my colleague has just mentioned the issue of gender-based violence. That is very, very rampant. We see a lot of complaints, husbands assaulting their wives, people, women thrown out of their homes, issues of inheritance, issues of poor treatment in the home. So the commission is doing a lot in that regard. As earlier mentioned, we work in thematic areas, so we have departments that follow up and work with other people to ensure that these things are put right. We work a lot with the security enforcement agencies. What we do is that our mandate is to promote, protect, and get human rights enforced. But where it goes into the work of another agency, we ensure that after investigation, we hand it over to the proper agency that will now take it up and do it right. There has been a lot of settlements, at least since I have come on board, a lot of cases that involve families where children have perhaps been abandoned by their father, and through the intervention of the commission, those parties are brought together, they are settled, the man is made to take up his responsibilities. And one of the things that is also happening is that under the new act, we are actually going to be empowered. It's being worked in the process to have our decisions better enforced. That is when we now decide that a right has been violated, that of a child, that of a woman, that of anybody in the community actually, we can actually get the decision of the commission registered with the High Court and it is enforceable. So the act provides that, but we're working with the judiciary towards getting that implemented. And I think if that becomes implemented, it will make it much better for the enforcement of human rights in Nigeria.
Just kind of restate that again, the last part of what you said, in terms of the enforcement advantage or enforcement opportunity you are seeking for certain kinds of decisions or for all kinds of decisions.
Yes.
I would like you to clarify that for the benefit of our viewers.
Okay. So, hitherto, once the commission sits and takes a decision, it does not have the power to enforce it. It has to go through the legal process and it takes a long time. But under the 2010 Act, the commission has now been given the right to register its decision to have the same effect as a decision of the High Court of Justice. So if we now were engaging with the judiciary to have a practice procedure of doing this, such that if today somebody comes with a complaint and we see that his rights have been violated and we think he should be compensated, if it is monetary compensation, let's say for example he is entitled to 10 million naira. That 10 million naira that the commission has awarded, the commission can take it to the High Court and say this is our decision and it is stamped and approved as the decision.
As though it were a decision of the High Court.
Of the High Court. So it will take time to achieve that because there are a lot of procedure issues relating to that.
Yes, I'm wondering because well, the civil advocate is here. A number of issues or a number of concerns will arise as to, well, how does the commission itself arrive at its decisions? And then if it's now recorded as a decision of the High Court for enforcement, does the judgment debtor have a right of appeal against that decision that has been recorded? It can escalate it to the Court of Appeal and escalate it further through the Supreme Court. But it's important that at least the Commission recognizes that, okay, to make enforcement speedier and to ensure that those who come to you for complaints do get justice, that this process is taken on. There's an issue that the chairperson raised, and I would like the executive secretary of the commission to also speak on this. After EndSARS, what has happened?
Of course, after the EndSARS, which jolted the entire country, the National Economic Council, in collaboration with the Commission, decided that to deal with the issues of the moment, because it happened all over the country, that panels of investigation should be set up in all the 36 states. Those who had sufficient number of complaints, also to be set up that is to deal with all complaints on the table. Then the National Economic Council also thought of going forward, what happens, and they also set up state security and human rights committees at all the states. And these state and security and human rights committees were to be headed by the governor of the states, with the police represented, with the military represented, with civil society NBA represented, and with the commission represented, to deal with in future new cases. However, all the state panels on SARS were also, in all the states, we also have the members of the National Human Rights Commission represented in all the states. And we had about 28 states that set up the SARS panels. All these states have completed their sittings and have also submitted their reports. The commission has also completed its own sittings, and of course, we have released the report. 28 people were indicted in terms of being recommended for dismissal. 25 people were recommended for prosecution. 15 were recommended for other various kinds of disciplinary action, and then about 4 for demotion. But as you know, the Police Service Commission is responsible for disciplining erring police officers. We have submitted our reports for implementation to the Police Service Commission, and knowing also before you can start prosecuting the police officer, you have to dismiss that officer first before you now, and then the prosecution belongs to that Honorable Attorney General of the Federation or the Honorable Attorney General of the states. Now, some of the we have also dealt with the civil aspect of payment of compensation, like the Honorable Chairperson had said, which is it has never been done before, that the Commission was empowered by government to pay compensation to victims of human rights violation arising from the SARS system. Some states have also paid compensation. I think Ekiti and Osho and Lagos have paid compensation. Other states are still foot dragging because some of them feel this is something that was directed by the federal government, therefore the federal government should support them. But I know at inception the intention was you go and deal with all this in your various states, then there are certain kinds of course, if offenses are committed by the police is a federal agency, but the disciplining aspect has to be done by the police or Police Service Commission, but the prosecution has to be done by the state attorney general because these are within the criminal laws of the various states. And if you come to compensation, there is absolutely nothing wrong in the state government paying this compensation because these were infractions committed in protecting the citizens of the state. They can reconcile with the federal government later, just like if the state government constructs federal roads in the state, they do claim for these things later. But the citizens and the individuals of the state should not be allowed to go on suffering. So I think the states have to be proactive about this and deal with the aspect of compensation, which can bring some succor and also a kind of showing of commitment and responsibility, accountability that yes, we have violated the right of the citizens, the indigenous of the state. We are sorry for this. We've been able to do that at the federal level because we apologized for violations.
Isn't there, in a sense, a doctrine of covering the field? Because you appear to, I recognize the grounds for setting up the NSAS panel, investigative panels, but what role is your commission playing in ensuring that, look, other panels that sat and have reports indicating the violation of rights of citizens, that where there is need for redress, that the redress actually gets to the citizens or the families, assuming those persons are dead? Is your commission solely concerned with, okay, what happens at the federal level?
Of course, the commission's jurisdiction is all over the country. Now, part of the responsibility which we are taking up in the commission is collating all these reports and making sure that it goes back to the Federal Executive Council, even though the Office of the Vice President has that responsibility. But we are assisting to make sure that all these reports are collated and taken back to the National Economic Council to provide a way forward. So our responsibility is global. And we even empowered all the state panels. We trained them on their work. We trained them on how to assess their damages. And we also trained them on how to, compile their reports so that all the reports that are coming can easily be collated and analyzed. So we did all that just to make sure that they properly do their work, and at the collation stage, which is where we are now, it will be easier. We are hoping at the end of the day to have a comprehensive report, of a global report of what has happened across the entire country, but it's still work in progress.
All right, so we wait to see that report, very important. And, taking a cue from what he just said as regards EndSARS, NSAS and then the ban of Twitter last year, June 4, which lasted for over 6 months. These are some of the issues that has led to the low ranking of Nigeria as far as human rights is concerned. And Amnesty International is not, is not saying something different. I want to look at the issue of the Twitter ban and looking at the right of freedom of expression. We know that the freedom of speech in Nigeria is protected by Section 39, subsection 1 of the Constitution, the Article 9 of the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights of 1981, and so many other relevant and international legal instruments. The right to freedom of expression is key as far as human rights is concerned. Now, could you speak to us, Osai Ojigo, about this particular right? How is Nigeria faring? What really are the issues? Because initially you said the state, you're rating them high. Has the state really done well, talking about state actors, in protecting the rights of citizens when it comes to the freedom of speech?
Yeah. So just to clarify, I stated that Nigeria is high in complying with actually signing many of these international treaties. So on paper, on the face of it, it looks like Nigeria is fine. But when you now look at the implementation and getting justice for victims, that is where the biggest challenge lies. So more specifically around freedom of expression, what we have seen in the last few years is an assault on trying to regulate or limit the rights of people within this context of this right. The Twitter ban last year shook a lot of people because it was totally unexpected. It was not something we thought that we would see in Nigeria. When you look at the amount of media houses that exist, how vibrant Nigerian press was during the military era, and the fact that social media has become a tool of social expression, it has opened a lot of opportunities economically and also socially. And the reason why Amnesty International and several groups rose up against that Twitter ban was because it was a threat to the foundation of all other human rights. If people are not able to express themselves freely, if they are not able to share opinions and disseminate those opinions in a medium that they are comfortable with, then it means we're beginning to restrict people's freedoms. And there was no, under international law, there are certain exemptions where there are certain situations, exceptions, when such rights could be limited. And even when that happens, it has to be temporary. And in the case of the Twitter ban, it didn't meet any of those minimum requirements. That was why going to the ECOWAS court, the SERAP case against Nigeria, of which Amnesty International also submitted an amicus brief, the argument was that it was unlawful, it was illegal, it was excessive. There were other ways the government could have addressed the issue that they had with regards to comments made on Twitter without actually effecting that ban. And the ECOWAS court agreed with us, and that was why the decision in July this year was that Nigeria needs to do a lot more to ensure that our right is protected and that people who participated in that process are not punished, because there was also a lot of reprisals. There were issues that people could be sentenced to jail if they were to use Twitter. People had to come out to bring statements saying that they were tweeting from different countries and states in order to ensure that they were compliant. But it was really a wake-up call for the Nigerian government that when you try to intimidate people or threaten people, it does not work that way. You need to come to the dialogue table, but more importantly, you need to respect your own laws, because Article 9 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which Nigeria has also made it part of Nigerian law, and Article 19 of the ICCPR, which Nigeria has ratified and which is also part of our constitution, as you rightly quoted as well, provide the dimensions of which everybody in Nigeria, you don't even need to be a citizen of Nigeria, everybody in Nigeria should be able to enjoy that right.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Ojigo. Let's go back again to CP Lawrence Alobi. Earlier, you were talking about the concept of democratic policing, sure, which is what you recommend against the prevailing practice of a colonial hangover policing approach. I just keep wondering at all material times why there appears to be very low-level human rights education amongst law enforcement officers, so that from time to time you find a flagrant violation, for instance, of prescriptions on fair hearing, prescriptions on unlawful detention beyond a certain number of hours for the individual. Isn't this part of the curriculum for the training of law enforcement officers? I say law enforcement officers, police, civil defense, DSS, and all other agencies. They seem to operate in a world of their own, untouched by the notion of human rights.
Yeah, that's true. You see, like I said earlier, this militarized policing and colonial policing is what they're not being orientated, because policing is a practice. These are practice principles which they apply. And because policing, although the government is talking about community policing is getting community engagement in security or crime prevention of their community. But the principle, those community policing is not anchored on principle of democracy. Democracy, of course, we know the core values of democracy: human right protection, freedom of right. It's meant to serve the needs of the people. The principle is needs driven. It's also participatory, like democracy. But then the police and other security agencies too have not been able to see the need. Like the government talking about community police. Community police is just community engagement. It's not anchored on the principle of democracy. It has to be holistically addressed in terms of human right education. Human education is to ensure that the police officers and men and other security agencies imbibe these principles, because when you imbibe these principles, you cannot apply them. But it also make them more responsible officers of those services. When they now know that they need to know the right, for instance, it is presumed that anybody who has been made against, you are a suspect, you are guilty of the offense, and so forth. But when you know that as an investigator, whether you are civil DSS, you are civil defense, police, that you have a duty to establish the man's innocency or his guilt. We're not just assuming that because a complaint made against him is presumed to be guilty. So that education is very, very important. They need to orientate the police officers, also the agencies. Because the question of when you start get somebody suspect being brought to the station, start beating him or assaulting him because you are a thief, you are armed robber, and so forth. That is not being. They need that massive education for them to understand the tenets, the core values of democracy, and that core value of democracy, democratic policing, will help them to be more civil. More civilly approach to when carrying out their functions as law enforcement officers. The law is there for the good of man, not just for the first sake of the law. So it's when they enforce law that is based on the needs of the people, to add value to the life of the people, not to brutalize them, not to oppress them, and so forth. So I think security agencies across the board in the country need to establish that program of democratic policing and law enforcement, and also application of principle of emotional intelligence. Because some emotional intelligence will help the police officer to manage his own emotions and control his own emotions and manage the emotions of other people. For instance, it's like when I was a CPFCT, for instance, there was when the students of Abuja University blocked the whole highway in Abuja with trailers and tankers. When we got there, my men wanted us to start throwing tear gas. I said, no, you don't do that. You don't do that. First, talk to the student. Persuade them to understand why we are here. We're not here to brutalize them, to throw tear gas, to solve a problem. At least traffic has been blocked through heights and so forth. I started speaking to them. I didn't throw one tear gas. I played with them from going to the highway to the campus. So this is, you don't understand, you need people to understand that you're there to help them. You're not there to fight them. You're not there to brutalize them. That understanding is very, very important. So the education is very important because they need to know to be educated. It will enable to empower them to work better. So capacity building on a principle of democratic policing is key and central in law enforcement.
Does the Human Rights Commission recognize this gap in human rights education for law enforcement officers? And if it does, has it developed a scheme of capacity building such as CP Alobi is talking about? Because I know the evidence before us, we have to be frank, it's just a wanton violation of the rights of citizens by law enforcement officers, police, civil defense, DSS, prisons, you need them.
Honestly, that's the reality with us. Like the Honorable Commissioner said, you find out that there is lack of political will to actually reorientate the Nigerian police. Now, under colonial rule, the police then was to protect the colonial regime. Under the military rule, the police was to protect the military regime. So we have a police that is for regime protection, not for the protection of the people. Yeah. So you need a mindset. You need to change the mindset of the leadership of the Nigerian police, that we are now in democratic policing where the power belongs to the citizens. They just give their leaders the power. There's a social contract, So that reorientation can only work if the police itself understands itself and the circumstances under which it is now operating. That is not the situation now. It is not something which the head of state has to do, or it has to be the Inspector General of Police who understands that my mandate is supposed to be driven in this way. Because I believe Nigerians are good followers. That is my impression about Nigerians. Most Nigerians, if the instruction is clear and plain, they are ready to follow. Once the message is clear from the leadership of the Nigerian police that I'm not going to protect you if you violate the law, if you go against human rights or whatever, you will see everything will change. The curriculum, we have been working with the police on curriculums. A lot of civil society groups have been working with police on their curriculum. But look at the situation in police training colleges. If you pass through any police training college, there's no way you're not going to meet citizens. So it needs the commitment of the leadership of the Nigerian police to change the environment, to change the message, to change the perception. And then also to lead by example. If people go against the rule, you discipline them. Don't protect people. Look at what happened in Abakari's case. It's a case of condoning a young man for several years who was doing the wrong thing. When I was in charge of, when we were doing probing SARS, we invited Abakari for more than 5 times to come and answer to allegations of human rights violation. And he never came. And all efforts to bring him there was frustrated by the police. So you see how it has snowballed into a bigger national embarrassment. And that's what we're saying. If the leadership is not clear and decisive on doing the right thing, that's the kind of results you produce. So it has to do with the leadership of the Nigerian police to do this reorientation for officers to understand that in a democratic regime, that the citizen-centered police must be the order of the day. And that is why we have widespread insecurity. You have one government official, he will have 10 police escort. But the man on the street is just on his own. So the police as we have now is for protection of the regime, the top officials. The man there on the streets, like the last time we submitted a report to the president on SARS reforms, I told the president, I said, in my village, armed robbers will come on a Monday and rob on the streets house number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is they break, they go away. Tuesday, they give you a break. On Wednesday, they come back. They continue from house number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They go away. Thursday. Friday, they come back. They continue. And that's, so people there live at the mercy of God. It has nothing to do with anybody protecting them. But that is not how it should be. So we need really to make sure that the police we have is really for protection of the citizens. And it entails a lot of reorientation.
Yeah, to add to what, to add to what he had just said, leadership determines followership. The leadership of an institution, its principles, how assertive is it, how the willpower it has, will determine and set down rules of engagement, so code of conduct. And when you breach them, you have been sanctioned. But in the way the leadership is weak, like I said, today it has like the colonial military rule is regime protection. They don't concern about the citizens. So that orientation is very, very important. It's very, very, very important. The leadership of all security agencies must have that political will to train and retrain its officers and men for the good of the citizens, for them to be able to function to meet the needs of security needs of the citizens, not to protect the regime.
Thank you so much.
We have been engaging with the police.
You know what, Dr. Salamatu, we are going to have to take a short break now. So we'll pause you, and when we return from the break, you have the opportunity of weighing in on this particular aspect of the conversation, plus others. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a break now.
So, all right, welcome back. It's Good Morning Nigeria, and we will continue with our conversation. We still have our guests in the studio. We're assessing Human Rights Index in Nigeria. Before we went on that break, Dr. Salamatu, you wanted to share your thoughts as regards what Lawrence Alobi, CP, had said.
Yes. Thank you very much. I was going to say we've been engaging a lot with the law enforcement agencies since our own council came on board. We've met with the Inspector General of Police and discussed a lot of the issues that have been talked about today. And just 2 days ago, we were with the Director General, DSS. But I want to in particular key in on an aspect that the CP mentioned, that is education. And I think it is one issue that everybody around the table has spoken about. And I'm talking of education in a wider perspective, because that's what we're trying to do now at the Commission. If you look at the rights as they are human rights, one of the rights is right to education. So in our own council, we have decided to particularly focus on that right because of its implication on all other rights. And by this I mean, if you look at one of the foremost and basic rights that anybody should have, it is education. And if you look at all the menaces we are having, and you look at the root cause of them, you could also trace it to lack of education. Today, we say Nigeria has about 200 million citizens. In the entire world, when you look at it, they say the largest number of children out of school are in Nigeria. So unless, and those children that are out of school and are not attending school are the ones that grow up to be involved in some of the vices that have manifested. So we think that it is very, very important that the right to education is focused on. We canvass it, we advocate it. Next year, one of our agenda is to go around all the geopolitical zones. We don't have enough funding to say every state, but at least every single geopolitical zone, maybe 2 or 3 states in a zone, and talk about all human rights, but particularly
on
also
education.
On education. What can we do to improve education? What can we do to reduce the number of children that are out of school? And what can we do to ensure that people are made to put their children in school and it is enforced?
Yeah, valid point, Dr. Salamatu. Of course, education is key when you talk about human rights. You actually nailed it, really, because if everybody's educated about it, you cannot violate my right. I know what to do and all of that. But away from education, the theme of the national, or rather the theme of Human Rights Day this year is dignity, freedom, and justice for all. Now, and you know that is not possible without the right to health. Yeah, so, and that's why I think we should talk about, you know, the right to health. Looking at, you know, as accessible, affordable, quality healthcare. We know where Nigeria is at the moment. What is the Commission, you know, looking at as we celebrate the Human Rights Day on the 10th?
The Human Rights Day on the 10th this year, we have started right from 16 days of activism. On the 25th of November, we'll have a lineup of programs till the 10th. 10th is the last day. And in all the 36 states, we'll have office. The National Human Rights Commission has office in the 36 states. We're meeting with stakeholders, drumming up awareness and consciousness about sexual and gender-based violence, domestic violence. We're meeting stakeholders like the parliament in all the states, the governor, the speaker, the chief judges of the states, traditional institutions, religious institutions, civil society members like NBA, and so on and so forth, to continue to create awareness around the grassroots so that people can even realize their rights and stop all these kind of things at that level. However, at the national level here, the council met and took decisions like on this issue of focusing on education next year, and also the elections, which is coming up next year. Yesterday we had a civil society forum, which is also continuing today, to merge kind of consensus with civil society actors, because Human Rights Commission cannot work without civil society. They are compatriots in making sure that the rights of Nigerians are promoted and protected. And yesterday the civil liberties group met. Also the group on elections met yesterday. Today we are having the group on women and other groups at risk meeting today. We are also having the group on sustainable development and so on and so forth meeting today. Tomorrow, which is Friday, we are meeting with all the UN agencies to discuss common human rights issues. Later in the afternoon, we are going to meet the business community, because we also see that businesses violate human rights. So we think of mainstreaming human rights into businesses, and also we are also meeting with the businesses to make them understand they need to contribute to human rights protection. For instance, there is a provision in the National Human Rights Commission Act which provides for the Human Rights Fund, and this fund is supposed to be contributed to by all who mean well for the country. Businesses who make more profit if there is enabling peace to do business. So if they drop some little money inside such a fund to make sure that we protect human rights more, there's nothing bad about that.
All right.
Okay.
So hold on a second, so that we don't get lost. Okay. Because you've been emphasizing what the Human Rights Day celebration would be. That's fine. But I would like the country director of Amnesty International to respond to an issue. From time to time, the Nigerian government, through the federal government, or more particularly the Ministry of Defense, or on occasion the services, let's say the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, have had to respond to reports and claims by Amnesty International, because it is suggested that on occasion some of your accounts of human rights violations on the war front against terrorists and bandits, that some of those reports are either misleading or intended to undermine the country's efforts in dealing with these grave security threats to the country. How do you respond to this?
It's quite unfortunate that when Amnesty International, when we release our reports, or other NGOs on the violations being committed by Nigerian security forces, that the first response is to deny and to dismiss the report first of all, because we have our own modus operandi. We also explain in our reports how we gather this information, our methodology, and it's really pointing to areas where they should take more seriously and where people have raised concerns. And as a watchdog, what we expect the authorities to do is to then look inwards and carry out those investigations, because we're like sharing a light on an area that they might have missed. And in cases where they've even accused us of just creating noise just for the fun of it, you will find that outside of the public gaze, they actually go and fix those issues. It's just that they don't come back and tell you that they've addressed it. One example is the Human Rights Manual and the Rules of Engagement of the Nigerian military. A lot has changed since Amnesty released its reports in 2016, which led to most of the uproar and the investigations, the setting up of the special panel, the special board of inquiry on military violations. And as a result of those rules of engagement, they have better officers now, but they're not going to come back and tell you that it's as a result of Amnesty throwing light and saying some of the officers were not trained. You need to, people have been on the field for months, for years, they've not been replaced. They wouldn't come back and tell you that, but at least we are happy that they have taken on board those issues. They are addressing it. It's just that they don't want to acknowledge that those were issues.
The reason I raised this issue, until you're quite familiar with it.
Yes.
Again, the aspect of rules of engagement. those rules of engagement have been in existence, and the military, of course, had been several steps ahead of other law enforcement agencies, such as the police. Because they talked about you seeking, let's say, Amnesty through its report, seeking to dampen the enthusiasm of officers who are on the front lines, and then also seeking to give oxygen to the terrorists. I'm sure you have also encountered this occasionally. They say, fine, you are saying that the military or the armed forces did the following. What are your own reports about the gross violations of human rights by the terrorists themselves, by the bandits? And you don't seem to have a corollary report on what those terrorists and bandits are doing.
We do have those reports. In fact, those reports come out simultaneously. But I guess because the reports on the security agents hits home more. So that gets a lot of airtime because they want to come out to defend it. So, for example, when the governor of Borno State was closing the camps and saying people needed to go back, there was an attack of Boko Haram ISWAP on some of the settlements. Amnesty International issued the report. But in the media, what carried more weight was us saying that the government of Borno State should not be closing the camps because people are not ready to go home. We've also had cases where there was a case of when ISWAP actually beheaded and executed about 40 people because they felt that they were informants. We raised that report as well. We published it. We also shared it with international agencies.
Have they changed as a consequence? Have they changed in their tactics? If the military is changing as a result of your report, have those terrorists changed as a result of your report? Anyway, that's an open-ended question. That's right. That's right.
Okay, so as we round off now, Dr. Salamatu, the question I raised to Dr. Joko, I'd like you to just quickly touch on it because he didn't quite hit the nail on the head. I talked about the right to health. In trying to drive home the theme of this year's celebration, which is on dignity, freedom, and justice. Besides education, what really do you think that we can do to improve that particular right? Because at the moment, we are nowhere. And what do you think the commission can also do in that regards?
Well, because I'm so passionate about education, I will tie that right to health to also education. Because you see, if people are educated, even health itself becomes better. If you have young girls educated, gone to school, done secondary school, can you imagine the standard of health that will be booming in their families and as they go along doing their businesses? But I think when we talk about right to health, most of what the commission can do is to advocate and ensure that the right messages are sent. It's not like we have the money to go into the health issues and do it ourselves. So I quite agree that there is need for more awareness, particularly health of the elderly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll quickly come to you, CP Alobi, on the final note. I'm asking this because I want people to get it clear. What we see now is when someone commits a crime, especially when the person involved is, at the top, and the person who commits the crime is down there, the person disappears. After some days, they now discover the person was taken by one of the security operatives. Then you start to hear that the person was tortured. And then when the media takes up the issue, before you hear, the person has been arraigned. What really is the procedure when somebody, is said to have committed a crime? Just for clarity, so that, we don't...
everything has a process. Somebody commits a crime, is not being invited or arrested. And if he's arrested, the statement is being obtained. He has to make a voluntary statement after being cautioned that whatever he said be put in writing and be given in court. That has to be fully.
And how many days can the person be held?
No, it's a bailable offense. It's bailable. If it's not a bailable offense, it's not bailable. Like murder, for instance, armed robbery, for instance, these are not bailable offenses. But assaults, these are bailable offenses. One thing I want to say before we round up is that human rights is what we concerned about. The right. We've not been able to emphasize on the obligations of the citizens.
Duties.
The duties of the citizens. Because like Rousseau, John Locke, and in their theory of social contract, the citizens have a duty. But here we emphasize on my right. What are my obligations as citizens? What am I supposed to do? Like now, the security agencies also have a right. The right to have their own life. But the citizens don't see that the security agencies have their right. Because here they they have attacked policemen stationed, vandalized NEC offices and so forth. The citizens have a right. The citizen has a duty and obligation. So I think emphasis should be to how do we make our citizens to be more responsible? How do we educate them of their own obligations? Section 24A of the Constitution provides that it's constitutional duty of a Nigerian citizen to assist the agency in maintaining law and order. How will Nigerians are more well informed to be the more responsible citizens where they can now know that you should be conscious of their obligations and duties as citizens? That will go a long way, even reducing human rights abuse. Because in that case, people now know I don't have to abuse somebody because he's doing that. Let me walk in line with the law. So I think the government, I don't know what national orientation is doing. National orientation should carry out this education. Let the people citizens know that they have a duty. Not only emphasize on right and right. Let's talk about what are the obligations. When you have a right, it's a compelling obligation. So it's very, very important that we emphasize on the duty of the citizen to make the citizens more responsible citizens.
All right. Well, I think that's a balancing note on which to end this conversation. That yes, if you have a ledger, the two entries should be your rights and then also your obligations to the state and then to fellow citizens as well, because sometimes that's where the challenge comes from. So on that note, we'd like to
go on our International Human Rights Day, which is coming up on Saturday.
Yes, well, I'm sure that there will be statements. Well, fantastic. I'm sure there will be statements and news stories that will emerge from that. We're very pressed for time now on Good Morning Nigeria, and we'd like to thank our four guests who've been with us on the program this morning. First, let's appreciate the chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission Governing Council, Dr. Salamatu Suleiman. Thank you for being our guest this morning. And retired Commissioner of Police, lawyer Lawrence Alobi, thank you for being with us on the program this morning. We also would like to thank the country director of Amnesty International, Mrs. Osayo Jigo, for her contribution to our discussion. And also we'll appreciate Learned Senior Advocate Tony Ojukwu, Executive Secretary of the Human Rights Commission. Thank you for being around.
Thank you for having me too.
Okay, so that's it for our conversation segment. Before we, if we can get some sports, but I think that it looks like
there's no time for
yes, we are pressed for time. So thank you for being on Good Morning Nigeria with us today, watching from home. Join us again tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
All right, Kingsley, as we sign off, of course, we must say congratulations to Morocco for proceeding to the next round. I'm here, John. Have a great day.